Hi everyone, I'm Shelly and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. As my house prepares to get ready for our new homeschool year next week, I thought that I would share with you some tips on how to have a relaxed read aloud time. I say every so often that our family loves read aloud time. Of all of the activities that we do together in our homeschool, read aloud time is that one activity that seems to have just lasted throughout the entire thing. And I do get a lot of questions about read aloud time because it can be intimidating for some families. And I think that's because we want to do such a good job with our children that sometimes when we start out with read alouds, we can be too rigid. Sometimes we can try to look too much like school because that's all that we know from growing up. That's what we think that education looks like, and that can even carry over to read aloud time. And unfortunately, that can lead to some unrealistic expectations about what read aloud time should look like. So the one thing that has really helped us to continue with our read aloud time through this, now we're entering our 13th year of homeschooling, is the fact that I have learned how to relax, and I'm going to share with you some tips on how we do that. So the first thing I want to tell you is that atmosphere is everything. When we started homeschooling, our read-alouds looked very similar to what they do in schools. We had a separate classroom for all of our homeschool lessons, and my kids, I even found them individual school desks at a thrift store. So it actually looked like a mini classroom. And I would stand up, usually stand up, sometimes I would sit on a stool in front of the chalkboard, and I would read to my kids that way. Yeah, that's how our read aloud time started out. I'm so glad that we didn't finish up with it that way. And then over time it did transition. Eventually we moved to a more relaxed learning atmosphere where my kids would be sitting on the couch or sometimes in beanbag chairs as I was reading to them, but I would still be standing there in front of them very formally reading this read aloud to them and solemnly showing them the pictures like you're supposed to when you're reading those picture books, right? And again, that's something that has changed, and we usually do keep the couch learning setting, and sometimes the beanbag chairs, when our kids have them, they get broken so easily. But that's the one thing that you need to remember when it comes to homeschooling, is that no formality is required. You can skip the desks and the other schoolish embellishments, because when you bring those into your homeschool setting, that's when that rigidity comes in. That's when you start to think of yourself more as a teacher than as a parent. And when you are homeschooling, it is so important that you keep the home aspect in the school aspect of it. That's why home education is a better term for it. I just say homeschooling because that's how it's usually known. But the home part is the most important part. So you need to remember that. There is no formality required when it comes to read aloud time. And I mentioned this before, but keep it comfy. Take your read aloud time to your living room or your family room, maybe even your bedroom. You could, sit on your bed, and your kids, depending on how many you have, they could cuddle around you. If it's warm outside or if it's a particularly nice day, you could take it outside, but move away from those desks. Move away from sitting at that kitchen table, unless you really enjoy it there. But if you find that you're not enjoying your read aloud time, try to move it somewhere else where you can feel a little bit of a sense of relief almost. It's a great way for you to start your homeschool day. That's usually after Bible. Read aloud is always the first thing that we do, because even though we start several hours after my kids have woken up, it's thundering really loud out there. So if you hear anything, that's what it is. There's a big thunderstorm right now, but we need it. It's been like 100 degrees all day. Anyway, your kids, they really do need that relaxed atmosphere. They need to be able to just enjoy themselves, ease into that homeschooling day rather than jumping in. So some of the other things that we like to do is I like to light a scented candle just to have that, you know, that nice homey atmosphere aroma in the house. My kids always grab their blankets and pillows. As soon as they know that it's read aloud time, they all run and they get their blankets and pillows, no matter what season it is, because it just makes them feel at home. And another thing is, you know, to just bring in some nice quiet snacks maybe for your kids if it's something that they could handle while they are listening to a story. In the summertime, some great quiet snacks, or in the spring would be maybe some freshly cut watermelon or some pineapple. In the wintertime, my kids really enjoy hot chocolate with a candy cane inside of it. And this is a way that I always say this, but to bring in memories with your children. These are fond memories that they are going to have in the future when you have certain things that you do at certain times of the year during your read aloud time. So the next thing is skip the literacy mumbo jumbo. When my older kids were in school, I used to go to all of those parent meetings, and I would go to the after school programs, and I was on the community schools board for my school. Yeah, I actually did that. I was in PTA. I was involved in a lot of different things, and they were always telling us ways that we should read to our children. And I remember that as I was watching them, I was thinking, well, why do we need to do all these things? Why can't we just read to our kids? But I always figured, well, they know what they're talking about. You know, they were educated for this, so maybe I should start doing these things. Thankfully, I didn't, though. But if you don't know what I'm talking about, let's think twice about the picture walk. Have you heard about the picture walk? So as a parent, we were always told that when we are reading to our children that we should think about doing a picture walk with our kids first, where we would do, especially now this is for picture books, obviously, because it's a picture walk, but you would have your child sit with you and you would go through each and every page, just really studying every picture before you even read the book. Now, if you are doing a Charlotte Mason method of learning, you know that picture study can be a really great way to get your child's to work on their attention to detail. Sometimes it can really tell them about the story. But when you are paging through a picture book before you even read it, it does have some drawbacks. So first of all, kids get impatient. I noticed this a lot when I would go to the after school programs and they would have the teacher doing the picture walk through it before ever reading the story. The kids would get impatient, and it would also give the story away. So as the teachers will be going through the picture walk, you know, each and every picture, they would be asking the kids, what do you predict? What do you predict is going to happen next? And so what ends up happening is that the kids know what happens before the story is ever read to them. And it takes the element of surprise out of it. So really, say no to the picture walk. It's not necessary. Another one is the page by page discussion. And this is something else that I noticed when I used to go to the after school programs with my kids. One of them in particular, I may have mentioned this in another video, was that the person reading the story, now this was for kindergartners. I was in the kindergarten group with my daughter, and they were talking about the word synergy and how this story was a great example of the word synergy. And it was a picture book about a fish. It might have even been rainbow fish. I'm not even sure. It was about a fish though. And what would happen is that she had the teacher or the person reading it had a post-it note on every single page. And she would read one page and then she would talk to the kids about synergy. And then she would read the next page and she would talk to them about synergy and ask them questions about synergy. And this went on through the entire story. And I remember my daughter, now my kids were homeschooling at the time that we were at this after school program, but I had heard that homeschool students were welcome to come to these after school programs and they gave away free books. So I was like, oh yeah, let's go do this. It's the last time that I ever went there when my kids were homeschooling. First and last time that we ever went there as homeschoolers. Because I remember that my daughter kept looking at me like, what is she doing? And again, I could see the kids rooching around, getting really antsy. They weren't interested in the discussion. They just wanted to read the story. And what happened was that from the page by page discussion, the person who was reading it was actually breaking up the flow of the story and was really ruining it for the kids. So, you know, I know that you're going to have so many pieces of advice about literacy, and it's all going to come down to certain techniques, but you can't beat just reading to your kids as a parent. Don't worry about the literacy mumbo jumbo. Don't worry about what the experts say that you should do. Just read to your kids. And so really, to sum it up, there's no place like home. Be a parent, not a teacher. Don't worry about picture walks. Don't worry about rigidity and standing in front of the classroom. Don't worry if your kids seem to be rushing around a little bit, because they're kids. What you need to do is think back to the time before your kids were even school age. What were the sorts of things that you did when you read to your kids then? Well, you probably just read to them. Maybe looked at the pictures as you read the story. That's a good time to study the pictures, right? As you're reading the story, not beforehand where you give everything away. You were probably also having some discussions in the middle of the story. Maybe your child had a question about the story. Maybe sometimes your child would start talking about another topic, and you might have to steer them back to the story again. And these are all things that you can still do with your kids when you are doing a read aloud in a homeschool. Always remember that first and foremost, you are a parent, and that is who your child needs. And when it comes to read-alouds, that's what's going to work the best. That's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one either here or over on Instagram. And if you like my work and would like to check out my Patreon page, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. And I hope you have a great day.